The current political landscape is marred by a troubling reality: the damaging impact of Chancellor Rachel Reeves' recent budget. It is no longer a matter of speculation. The evidence is irrefutable, and the consequences are looming ominously over the economy. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, has delivered a bleak assessment that mirrors the sentiments of countless citizens who are grappling with the harsh realities of rising costs and stagnant wages. The economic turbulence we now face is not merely a passing storm but rather a profound crisis directly attributable to the misguided fiscal policies steered by the current administration. Let's get straight to the point. Reeves' budget has systematically undermined the progress we had hoped to achieve in combating inflation. After a brief respite where consumer price inflation dipped to a commendable 1.7% in September, the OECD strikes a disheartening note, predicting a resurgence to 2.7% next year, if we are to believe that is the worst-case scenario. The Bank of England's more pessimistic forecast of 3% only adds salt to the wound. This is not merely a statistical anomaly. It is a tangible consequence of a budget that has failed to account for the broader economic implications of its tax hikes and spending sprees. The Chancellor's decision to impose a staggering £40 billion tax increase primarily on businesses is a colossal blunder. The reality is that businesses, in a bid to protect their bottom lines, will inevitably pass these additional costs on to consumers. The result? Higher prices for everyday essentials, further exacerbating the cost of living crisis that has already left many families teetering on the brink. The proposal to raise the minimum wage by a staggering 6.7% does little to alleviate this burden. Instead, it merely adds fuel to the inflationary fire. The public sector pay increases, while well-intentioned, will also contribute to rising costs, an ironic twist given that these measures are meant to support workers. The implications extend beyond mere prices. They reach into the very fabric of our economy. Prior to the budget, financial analysts at Goldman Sachs predicted a reduction in UK interest rates from 4.75% to 2.75% by November of next year. Now, thanks to Reeves' fiscal miscalculations, the OECD suggests we won't see rates dip to 3.5% until 2026. This means 2 more years of elevated borrowing costs, squeezing the wallets of mortgage holders and consumers alike. Who is responsible for this financial turmoil? It is undeniably Rachel Reeves and her administration. Moreover, the Chancellor's borrowing spree, projected to add an extra £30 billion in debt each year, will only exacerbate the situation. This reckless approach will trigger a staggering £70 billion surge in public spending, further inflating the economy and driving interest rates skyward. It's a vicious cycle of debt and inflation, and the average citizen will bear the brunt of these misguided policies. Let us not forget the chilling impact on economic growth. Under the previous government, we saw modest growth of 1.2% in the first half of the year. Following the transition to Labour, growth has plummeted to a mere 0.1% in the third quarter, culminating in a total of just 1.3% for the year. The OECD's prediction of a mere 0.9% growth in 2024 raises alarm bells. Are we really facing the prospect of a shrinking GDP in the latter part of that year? If the OECD is correct, we may well be on the precipice of a recession, exacerbated by a chancellor who seems oblivious to the consequences of her actions. Even the OECD's optimistic outlook for 2025, predicting a 1.7% growth fueled by public expenditure, is fundamentally flawed. This so-called growth is nothing more than a facade, conjured by tax hikes and unsustainable spending that will ultimately drive the national debt to unprecedented heights. Once this temporary surge dissipates, we will be left grappling with a growth rate of just 1.3% in 2026, a grim reflection of the long-term damage inflicted by Reeves' policies. In conclusion, the time for complacency is over. The evidence is glaring, and the stakes are too high to ignore. As we confront the fallout from this disastrous budget, it is imperative that we hold our leaders accountable for the choices they make. The path to recovery will not be paved with empty promises and reckless spending. It requires a steadfast commitment to sound fiscal policy, one that prioritizes the well-being of the citizens over political expediency. If we do not act decisively, we will find ourselves mired in an economic quagmire from which recovery will be a distant dream. The warning signs are clear. It is time to demand better.